Welcome to another episode of Movie Moments, where we explore a scene, a line, or even just one look within a film to find deeper meaning and application within our own lives. Today we'll be unpacking a line by Martin Niemöller, a Lutheran pastor portrayed in the movie Bonhoeffer. In this scene, Niemöller is speaking out against the Nazis, while also confessing to his own blindness and indifference toward the Jews earlier in this film. This comes in the form of a sermon delivered with a number of Nazi officials in attendance, at which point he says, "When the Nazis first came for the socialists, I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. And when they later came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak out because I am not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out, not soon enough, because I am not a Jew. So when they come to knock on my door, will there be anyone left to speak out for me?" A thought-provoking statement, to be sure, and one that's attributed to the real Martin Niemöller. Well, almost, because the actual Martin Niemöller made this statement after being imprisoned by the Nazis. And the official quote wasn't, "When they come, will there be anyone left?" It was, "Then they came, and there was no one left." In other words, it wasn't until after he became just like the others mentioned that he realized the injustice that was being done. To be sure, this is a hotly debated discrepancy in this film by those who hold this story dear. The complaint being that this was a rewriting of the story to fit the narrative the filmmakers wanted to tell instead of the one that had already been told. But I would argue that by reworking this historical timeline, intentional or not, the creators of this film may have done something beautiful. We'll come back to that thought in a moment. First, a story. Several years ago, we took my father to a restaurant to celebrate his birthday. For context, a few years prior to this occasion, my father was in a severe car accident that left him quadriplegic. He was confined to a chair from that day forward, and as you might imagine, that changed our lives completely. Though some of those changes came gradually as we begin to realize the number of things a person takes for granted in life when they're not personally affected by the way things are. One such time happened that day in the restaurant. It was a Sunday afternoon in the South, which meant every churchgoer in town was looking for a place to eat. So trust me when I say the place was packed. And the layout of the space was such that to get from one end of the room to the other, you had to weave and squeeze your way through a maze of tables and chairs, which to a fully capable individual was a routine experience. But to my father, well, it was an unimaginable obstacle course. I immediately went to work asking people to inch this way or that way so Dad could get through, and we managed in time to get from point A to point B. But that day changed me. Because until that moment, for the first 35 years of my life, I never once considered how difficult something as simple as getting around in a restaurant was for someone in a wheelchair. I never gave thought to how this particular system didn't work for everyone. There's this powerful quote by a Presbyterian minister named Frederick Buechner that says, "There can be no real peace for any of us until there is some measure of peace for all of us." Profound. And yet how easy is it to not realize the lack of peace others are living under because we aren't experiencing such turmoil for ourselves? It's the story of my father. It's the story of Martin Niemöller. Because like me, perhaps like you, Niemöller didn't see the injustice until much later. But this is what I love about this particular creative liberty from this film. Again, here is perhaps the beauty of it. Because by moving things around and having Niemöller make this statement from the pulpit rather than on the other side of his own imprisonment, I believe it gives hope that perhaps in our story, we can do the same. It's a vision of humanity that finds a way to look after one another, not simply because we've been affected too, but because we see the other in the midst of their struggle and their pain. Maybe what this scene gives us is an opportunity to be better by seeing not through our own eyes, but through the eyes of those that may not yet know the peace we do. It's a call to all of us to not wait until we find ourselves saying, "Then they came for me, and then I found myself affected by the system," but when they come, when I found that it didn't work. It's forward thinking instead of backward thinking. It's proactive versus reactive. It's rewriting the story to fit the narrative we want to tell instead of the one that's already been told. And when it comes to injustices, well, wouldn't that be beautiful to tell a different story? Maybe that kind of rewrite can begin with me. maybe it can begin with you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's breakdown, click that like button, subscribe for movie moments yet to come, as well as reactions, reviews, box office updates, and more. And let us know in the comments, did you see Bonhoeffer? Do you remember this scene? And where in your own life have you seen this truth play out? Let's talk about it below.